Good morning, everybody. I'm Nicola Barrett, Chief Corporate Learning Officer of Emory Executive Education at Goizueta Business School. Thank you for joining us today. When we started these business over breakfast sessions in April, we had no idea that we would still be sheltering in place, wearing masks, and working virtually in July. And yet here we are. A great deal has happened since Professor Tom Smith kicked off a series of discussions about the economy and how it was affecting you and me, our organizations, industries, and country. Our school is named after Roberto C. Goizueta, the former chairman and CEO of Coca-Cola, who challenged us to not just teach the way business is, but to teach business how it will be. And this has certainly been the focus of Goizueta faculty, staff, and leadership over the last several months, as we've accelerated changes about how and what we teach, how and what we work on, and most importantly, being focused and guided by our values and what it means to be and to facilitate principled leaders who will create and lead the organizations of the future. Goizueta is changing, as is our society. However, our values remain constant. As with past webinars and all of the learning opportunities we offer, we ground the academic research with its practical application. That is one of our values, and Professor Tom Smith exemplifies this approach. As many of you know, Tom Smith is an expert in the areas of labor economics, pricing, sports economics and financing, and the economics of the entertainment industry and healthcare. And he draws on all of this for today's webinar, focused on helping us understand what's happening in the economy and how this influences and impacts us individually, our families, our businesses, and communities. Tom's going to kick off the webinar with some observations about what's been happening and what this might mean. And then we will have a Q&A. So please write your questions in the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. And the team will do their best to make sure that Tom has a chance to answer as many of them as possible. At the end of today's session, there will be a short 5-question survey that we really appreciate you filling in, because this helps us understand what you're most interested in and how we can be most helpful. Enjoy the morning with Tom, and I look forward to continuing the conversation each Thursday morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. I appreciate that introduction. I hope you guys are doing well. I'm out in my back porch. I've been hanging out here. I know I interacted with you guys a lot during the first month of this crisis, and when we started this webinar, and then I'm coming back, maybe once a month or so to give kind of some updates. And so I'll start off with maybe 12 minutes of some observations, some things that I think are going to be important to understand going forward, and some things to keep an eye on, and then just go to a bunch of questions. So every Thursday, as you guys, I'm sure, are aware at this point, they release the new initial unemployment claims. Again, about 1.5 million initial unemployment claims. So over the course of this this pandemic, we probably had more than 50 million people filing initial unemployment claims. The current number of people who with continued claims is probably between 30 and 40. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics is keeping track of these things, and they're reporting that it's maybe somewhere around 32 million people with continued claims. The last time that I interacted with you guys, I was talking about the unemployment numbers from May and April, and I was suggesting that they were going to be a little bit higher than they were, and I was also suggesting that maybe the BLS was not going to reveal the correct number. I wasn't sure why it is that BLS was going to be off the mark. If you recall, last month the BLS came out and said the unemployment rate had fallen from like 16.3% down to about 13.5% or something in that neighborhood, and then they also noted that the unemployment rate could actually be 3 or 4 points higher, because they're not really capturing people who are absent from work the way that they should be. And that is people who are reporting the surveys. The survey for the unemployment for basically continued claims to identify if somebody is unemployed comes out the reference week of the 15th, wherever the 15th falls on that month. That's they question people during that week. And it just happens that the way that the questionnaire is designed is to try to capture people who are truly separated from the workforce, not people who are, let's say, on vacation. And one of the questions has to do with being absent from work and why you're absent from work. And it turns out that the BLS doesn't really know how to categorize a lot of the people who are absent, maybe furloughed. They say that I have a job, but I haven't been working. I have employment, but I haven't really received a paycheck. I'm kind of employed, but unemployed. And the BLS just doesn't know what to do with these people. And there was a note in the last two monthly reports that said, look, maybe these people are really unemployed. Like there's maybe another additional 3 or 4% that we're not classifying correctly. So what happens is that that I think that there's higher unemployment than we really know how to capture, because the survey was not designed to capture pandemically unemployed people. If the BLS corrects this, we could see a spike from maybe 13% back up to 18%, maybe a little bit higher. I think we have to read those reports and look at all of the, let's say, fine print to understand who's really unemployed and who really isn't unemployed. So regardless, let's suppose that the unemployment rate is really 15%. At the height of the 2008 recession, unemployment was hitting 10%. So this is 50% greater than that. This is a really bad recession. I think that a lot of people aren't feeling that it's that bad because the stimulus package came in so very quickly. Remember that during the 2008 recession, it was a year between when the recession started and when so there's this thing called the Business Cycle Dating Committee from the NBER, who is official umpire of recessions. So in the 2008 recession, the recession started in December 2007, and they didn't actually call a recession until, all the way through 2008. So we were in 2009. So 3/4 of the way, or 66% of the way through the economic recession, the NBER didn't actually even call it. So we actually got the official call from the Business Cycle Dating Committee. Yep, we're in a recession, right? When this is 3 months in, it's really unprecedented. But they said, look, it is a recession. We're clearly in a recession. There's no reason for us not to call the recession. The stimulus that we usually see coming out of recessions doesn't happen until after we've been in a recession for a long time. This time we were getting the stimulus as the recession was happening. And so I think a lot of the brunt of the recession is being shielded by this huge amount of stimulus. And that stimulus is going to roll off. At least part of it is going to roll off. So we're seeing the unemployment insurance, the additional $600. I'm sure a lot of you have read about this. That additional $600 is part of the CARES Act and the FFCRA. That is going away as of the 25th of this month of July. And so people will get 3 more weeks of this greater unemployment insurance, and then it's going to drop off. Some people have said that they don't want to renew it because that current unemployment insurance is disincentivizing some workers. So because they're receiving more being unemployed than they would if they went back to work, they're deciding not to go back to work. When this thing rolls off, now people will be incentivized to go back to work. Will there be jobs for these people? Not the same type of jobs and not in the same way. So there's an accordion effect that's taking place in our economy right now, right? And so the accordion effect is where parts of the economy are moving fast and then parts are moving slow. So the ends are moving slow, the middle is moving fast. And then when you pull the accordion back in, then it's maybe the ends are moving faster than the middle. The middle is standing still while you're bringing the accordion back in. So I'm seeing the accordion effect occurring because we're saying like California's opening. Nope, no, we're not opening now because we can't handle it. And Texas says, yeah, we're going to open up. No, maybe we're going to have to backtrack it. Right. And then Florida says, yeah, we're opening. Yep, we're going to be a hot spot and we should continue opening. Just business as usual. Well, different strokes for different folks. Different governors are taking different approaches to how they're treating the pandemic and also how they're allowing companies to open up. This lack of a sort of a nationalized plan, but even regionally within states, is causing lots of disconnect. Do I have a job? Do I not have a job? Is my sector opening up? Is it not opening up? And so what you're seeing is people have to make all these decisions on the fly, which might mean that people have jobs and then tomorrow all of a sudden they won't, or in 2 weeks all of a sudden the company will say, by the way, we just went out of business. And so this accordion effect is causing a little bit of havoc in terms of identifying what the overall impact of this economic recession is. Even if it hasn't impacted you directly, it's still considerably worse than the 2008 recession in terms of the unemployment numbers, but also in terms of things like GDP, bankruptcies, different types of bankruptcies. In 2008, remember, it was just one bank after another bank was failing. This is a housing sector. Construction companies were failing. All the companies that were involved in housing, manufacturing, ancillary goods, they were all failing because it was a housing recession. This is healthcare crisis recession. So we're getting failings in, True Religion Jeans has declared bankruptcy, and Papyrus, you can't go to the mall anymore and buy some cool stationery. I mean, that company is declaring bankruptcy. Of course, we've heard of Hertz, but yesterday, the largest single franchisee of Pizza Hut and Wendy's, PNC, they just declared bankruptcy. It turns out they've got a plan for about 93% of their debt holders, which means 7% of people are still going to be holding the bag on that one. And so that company looks like they're going to sell off all their Wendy's franchises and try to re-navigate the pizza space. But that's not a good sign. And so all these companies that are going bankrupt, eventually that's going to trickle down to workers, right? A bunch of people at Wendy's are going to become unemployed, or a bunch of people at Pizza Hut are going to become unemployed. And those are the kind of companies that were sort of the last resort, okay? That were the last resort of our previous recession. You say, so I became unemployed, but I can always go work at a Pizza Hut, or I became unemployed and I can always go work at a Wendy's. Now it's, if you're getting unemployed from a Wendy's, it's not like you say, okay, I'm going to become a banker, right? It usually goes the other way. So when those things start to fail is when I get very anxious about the direction of the economy. Let me mention a couple other things. So I mentioned, the unemployment rate, I think, is a little bit higher than what the official rate is. It officially is what it officially is, but I think the BLS has a hard time capturing people who are absent from work, who are disconnected from their official employer. And until the BLS figures that out and clearly identifies how they've tackled that problem, we got to look at those numbers with a little grain of salt. Second is that this unemployment insurance, the fiscal stimulus, is going to stop in 3 weeks. And if part of that stimulus falls, will other parts of the economy will they also fall? I believe that's true. I believe that additional money is going into the economy and creating a churn. And like other kind of fiscal stimulus, it is literally propping up parts of the economy. And then we've got this rash of bankruptcies. If it hasn't hit you yet, you'll start noticing some of the companies that you frequent or some of the companies that you use, now they're starting to go bankrupt. They just don't have the cash flow to maintain business as usual. And so they are going to the courts. And it's the disconnect is real, right? And so you've got companies that are going out of business, like Hertz, who are, and their stocks was 25 cents and well, it went up to $5 and now it's trading at like $1.50. that's a real disconnect. Like the CEO of this company has come out and said, look, this stock is going to be worthless at some point, just like JCPenney's. Like it is just, once we have declared bankruptcy and it's gone, the stock is just gone. It's everybody loses their money. And people are then still trading Hertz. That's a real disconnect, right? Think about this. Yesterday, the S&P had one of the best days ever, and we also reported the most COVID cases ever on the same day. It's just nuts in terms of this is happening, and also this is happening. How can these things be happening at the same time? It is an incredible disconnect to think about the economy and being as bad a shape as it is, and the stock market to be going as gangbusters as it is, and other parts of the economy, everybody seems to be saying, maybe things aren't as bad as they are. They are. I think things are as bad as they are and worse than most people think. I don't see an end to this recession until we have a real clear path forward about how to combat the COVID virus itself. I see one question, Christine and Keisha. I'm going to take this one question here because I saw that it was asked to me on this chat, and then we'll go to these questions. It says, a lot of people, Motley Fool, it's likely that the broad stock market crashed this quarter due to a second wave, higher mortgage and auto delinquencies, missed corporate earnings. So I think this is a good question, and then I'll just do general questions. So here's the big crisis that I think is about to happen. So you've got mortgages, which have been, there's some forbearance. For mortgages that are being held by Fannie and Freddie, there's a little bit of sort of federal protection. So there was a 3-month forbearance, and maybe this has now been pushed out a little bit. Eventually, somebody's still going to be holding the bag. Like, you still got to make payments on those. Maybe that's like 60% of mortgages that are being held by these semi-quasi government organizations. Another 30 to 40% are being held by private companies. So my mortgage is still being held by Fifth Third. Don't know why it's on their balance sheet, but it is. Well, Fifth Third doesn't have any real plan. They had a 3-month, 90-day forbearance. But then as part of it, they wanted a lump sum. So, I mean, I didn't partake in this plan, but I reached out to them to find out what it was. It was a very hodgepodgey kind of plan. Like you couldn't pay for 3 months, but now you can pay as a lump sum. They don't have a real plan going forward. They say, we're just going to tackle them one at a time. That's fine, but it's not a plan. And so as people are losing their jobs, and I believe that more people will lose their jobs as companies go through burn up their payment protection plan money, they're going to say, we just can't make this work anymore. Like, we tried, we thought it was going to go away. We thought everything was going to be fine. We thought the COVID was going to go away quickly or what have you, and we just can't make it work. We're going to shut down. So I think there's going to be a sort of this second wave, maybe the first wave really, of companies saying, that's it, we're done. We're going to pull the parachute on this. And that's going to create lots of sort of pockets of large number of people becoming unemployed all at the same time. If they're doing that and they're going to banks and saying, okay, I didn't need forbearance now, but now I need forbearance, they just might not have an appetite for it. So I think that that's going to be, it's going to be huge. We're hitting the 90-day period on rents. So after this month, people are moving into the 120-day delinquency. Well, nobody wants to hold either a mortgage or a renter at 120 days delinquency. So they got to start thinking about, am I gonna move a person out? So, I mean, if you're living in an apartment, you say, well, I just don't want rent for the next year. Well, that's not a reality. So I think companies have got to figure out what they're going to do with these renters. That's really problematic. Is it possible that we could have a bunch of people all of a sudden becoming homeless at the end of the summer because they've all been kicked out of their house? There's no, let's say, national policy for rent forgiveness. Yeah, that's a real possibility. Is it possible that a bunch of homeowners that mortgage companies that are holding private mortgages don't know what to do with these mortgage holders? Yeah, that's a real possibility. So I think that's huge, and I believe that's one of the next big issues to hit our economy, is that all of these 90-day rent forbearances and mortgage forbearances will turn into 120 days, go into official delinquency, and then these companies have to figure out what's going on. On top of that, talking to one of my friends who's in commercial, they're seeing a big issue with respect to what he's calling credit clients. So if you have a strip mall and you have, let's say, a Starbucks and a Papa John's, but you also have like a mattress company and a nail salon, a bunch of like one-off businesses, some little boutique place. Well, he said, maybe out of a 8 or 10 strip mall, facility, he's got maybe 2 people who said, we're done, they're out, everything's gone. Go ahead, you can try to track me down, I'm not paying, right? So that's like 20%. That's not good. He said, and then it's not the issue with the mattress store. It's not the issue with the nail salon. They're trying to make rent and they're trying to make good and they're trying to work with them. He's saying it's his credit clients, the Starbucks, the pizza joint, or the Subway place that you're familiar with. They're the ones that are saying, you know what, we're just not going to pay our rent. And you want to get into it with us, we're going to get our lawyers and you're going to have to get your lawyers. And we're all going to sort of go to the table, and you might get a judgment against us in 9 months or a year from now, but the courts don't have a whole lot of appetite for this right now. So you can spend $1 million trying to defend, and we've got an in-house lawyer and what have you. Or how about you just give us the next year without rent and then we'll renegotiate? Well, I mean, the company that owns the property or is the leaseholder on all of those facilities can hardly afford to not have one of their primary lessees, the Starbucks or the Papa John's or what have you, not pay rent for the next year. So they're trying to figure out, how do I keep these people happy because they're the anchor for my strip mall, and also they're not going to pay rent? Like, that just doesn't, those two things don't, that just doesn't compute. And so they're having a really, really, really hard time figuring out how to make that work. You say, most of us don't own strip malls. We don't. But that translates into other issues for the rest of the economy moving forward. I know there's probably lots of other questions. So Christine, Keisha, what do we got out there?
We've got some good ones, Tom. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
The first question asks, given what you've witnessed during this economic downturn, what are your top 3 economic indicators you would recommend paying attention to predict our nation's economy moving forward in this recession?
Well, unemployment is still number 1. Okay. And so I'm paying really, really close attention to that. I think it's a huge indicator because unemployment equals income, and lack of employment means lack of income, which means no economic traction. So that's the number 1 indicator. I usually look at utilization. So capacity utilization. So looking at companies, if they can make 100 cars, are they only making 70? Are they only making 60? So capacity utilization has fallen. So even though PPP, these payment protection plans, may be propping up some jobs, companies are not utilizing all of their resources to make product. When that happens, it's a very, very good indicator that the economy is not working at 100%. And if it's not working at 100%, it means that incomes are going to start to fall. Then consumerism starts to fall, consumption starts to fall, which then cascades into additional economic issues. So I look at capacity utilization. Okay. What I also do is I tend to look at loan delinquencies and other kinds of missed loan payments. So now I'm tracking CMBS loan defaults and moving from 0 to 30 day, 30 to 60 day, 60 to 90 day. I just started tracking these. I was looking at, let's say, loan defaults. So farm loan defaults, which were going up even before this crisis, and they are continuing to go up. So I think that loan defaults are a really good indicator for what's happening on the consumer side. And they say, I've got this much money. What am I going to use it for? Am I going to use it to feed my family, or am I going to use it to make sure I have a roof over my head? Or am I going to use it for my car. And so if I'm defaulting on my car payment, eventually that's going to come back around. Like, how am I going to get to work? They're going to come and take my car. So it's loan defaults to me spell sort of the beginning of the end. So as those start to go way up, things are going to go poorly. So those are the indicators that I tend to look at.
Thanks, Tom. Initially, we were expecting a U-shaped recovery of the stock market back in March, but we ended up getting a V-shaped recovery of the market. Do you expect the recovery of the market to continue, steady off, or fall back to reflect the current economic status?
So, I was having this conversation with one of my colleagues, Bill, recently, and I had said, look, I think I've got a new letter that we're talking about here, right? And everybody was talking about like a V-shaped recovery. So if you look at, let's say, like productivity or unemployment, if you have like a V-shaped recovery, unemployment spikes and then comes back down in the shape of this V, right? And if you're talking about a U recovery, then, you've got this, like it goes up like this and then it comes like back down like this, sort of like a mountain. Okay. Or people are talking about like a wheelbarrow. So it like unemployment goes like this and then it comes back like that. All right. Okay. Or if you're thinking about it sort of in other ways, the economy drops really suddenly. So what I said to him is I said, look, I think what we're going to have is this 9-inch nails N, right? And so I said, look, it's the economy went from, I'm from Chicago, and the Willis Tower, formerly the Sears Tower, was one of the tallest buildings in the country when I was growing up, when I went there. And we essentially went from the lookout, the top floor where you can like look over the skyline of the Midwest. So we took the elevator from the very top to the basement in 2 seconds. Bam. Right? And now, in terms of our economy, we are now taking the stairs up. So like we took the elevator from the top floor, and we were at unemployments of 3.5%, to the basement, like the express elevator, in 1 minute, right? Our ears are popping, everything. And now we're going to have to climb our way back out, right? And then what I fear is going to happen is that as we're doing this, there's going to be a second wave, and we're seeing that in terms of the exponential increase in cases, and boom, we're going to have this another fall. Like that's the 9-inch nails N. It's an upside down N. And he said, yeah, so you're talking like a sawtooth. And I said, yeah, I can actually see that happening, where we've got a scenario where we have this big drop, and then we climb our way back out, and then we have another drop, and we climb our way back out, and we have another drop, and we climb our way back out. And so you end up with this kind of sawtoothy ripsawing back and forth in terms of where the economy is heading. If you've just been tracking the market, let's say the S&P or the Dow Jones or NASDAQ or whatever else, I mean, it's like the Fed comes out and says, yep, we're not going to be raising interest rates for 2 years. Boom, the market drops 800 points. And then you're like, oh, wow, there's the cases of this new drug, the remdesivir. That thing, you're like, oh my gosh, this decreases the amount of time in the hospital. Bam, the market jumps up 500 points. You're getting this crazy, pattern, right? A sawtooth pattern of 500-point fall, then an 800-point increase, and a 1,000-point fall, and a 400-point increase, and a 300, and then it's just nuts. Oh, I think that's the same thing that's going to be happening with the economy, is that until we really get control of the underlying economic shock, which is the virus, the economy is just going to keep going through these fits and starts. It's great, it's terrible, it's great, it's terrible. I'm not feeling it. Oh my gosh, now I'm really feeling it. So far, we've been propped up by all of this fiscal stimulus, unprecedented amounts of unprecedented amount of using the word unprecedented, right? So this unique amount of fiscal stimulus. Well, part of this fiscal stimulus is about to go away. And when that happens, boom, the economy is just going to fall. And other companies that get burned through their PPP funds, bam, then they're going to go out of business. governors say, I'm going to start the economy. No, now I'm not going to start the economy. Nope. Now we're going to start the economy. Nope. Now we're going to pull back. Nope. Now everything's open except for all these things that aren't open. Well, how can you operate a business in that kind of environment? You barely can. So as a result, we're going to see this sort of zigzagging of where the economy is heading. I don't even know what letter that is, right? So looks like front of Charlie Brown's sweater. Okay, that's what I think the recovery is going to look like until we get control of the underlying shock, which is the virus. Once we have that going, then we have to fix everybody who's been, that's been kicked out of their apartment because they haven't paid their rent. But then in the meantime, we have huge parts of the economy which are just going to be different than they were before. So I don't know if theaters will ever make a comeback. They were teetering on the edge anyway. And so is this going to be something that people are really interested in doing going forward, going to a movie theater? I'm not sure. These big music fests, right? The Music Midtown and whatever else. I mean, my kid was all excited about seeing My Chemical Romance and Bomb. That's been stopped. No more music fests. Is that something that's going to be really attractive to a lot of people going forward? I don't know. It may be a thing of the past. And so that there'll be huge parts of our economy that aren't going to look like what they looked like before. And we have to tackle that after we find a vaccine. So I don't know. I guess, Christine, the shape of the economy is Charlie Brown's sweater.
Thank you.
I love it. Tom, do you think there's going to be another round of PPE or something similar, given the increase in the number of cases?
I think there should be. And people, I mean, you'll notice that these fiscal stimulus, they create and incentivize people in pretty interesting ways, right? And so you give people an additional $600 and some of them say, I can make more money staying home than I can working. Well, then that's fine. But it clearly creates a disincentive. So when this goes away, well, all these people have to go and find employment. Sure. But is there going to be employment for everybody? I must mention that, PNC, the Pizza Hut, Wendy's largest franchisee, they're declaring bankruptcy. And so is it possible that some Wendy's are going to close, Pizza Huts are going to close? Sure. They don't have in-person dining. Is it possible that they're just not hiring back the same number of people? Sure. So, so when the stimulus rolls off, we're going to have a really bad impact on employment, on the amount of money that people are carrying. I think there's some appetite for another round. I know that the Congress has voted in favor of stimulus 3 point whatever, and the Senate is still have it on their desk. I know that yesterday on Fox, Trump said he was in favor of another check, more than the initial $1,200. So maybe he was in favor of something closer to $2,000. But it's not clear that the Senate has an appetite for additional spending. I think there should be another round of SBA loans. I think that the SBA loans have been really good for the economy. And Melody was just asking this question. And I think the SBA loans have been terrific. Lots of companies have found this to be incredibly useful. Just about every company that I interact with, like smaller organizations, so my wife's company, the companies that she interacts with, the company of my son-in-law, the company that he works for, they all got PPP grants, and they're all using them to try to keep people employed, paying off their rents, what have you. That money they're burning through those funds. And when those funds are gone, the problem is cash flow, right? So we might have clients, but our clients are slow paying. Okay, it doesn't matter. You can have a good business model, but if your clients don't pay, you're still going to go out of business. So we need another round of fiscal stimulus in order to keep things propped up. Now, I have heard people report, and correctly so, they say the only reason the economy isn't worse is because the fiscal stimulus was so robust. yeah, that's the job of fiscal stimulus, is to keep things propped up. And so when that stimulus goes away, the economy is going to fall, primarily because there is an underlying crisis that's still impacting us. And it's in, I guess, I don't know, I just read like 37 states or something. It's gone up. And there's only 2 states where the number of cases are going down. So it's either staying constant or going up in all but 2 states. That's according to NYT, their numbers. So I think there should be another round of fiscal stimulus. I don't know what it's going to look like. It really depends on what Mitch McConnell, what he has an appetite for. And so, I mean, I guess we'll see. I'm not sure they're going to pass anything before their August recess, but they might. It'd probably be a good idea if they did.
Tom, do you see the potential for mass government takeovers to save industries?
Mass government. Okay, so there already is some mass programs. So whether you've been following this or not, you should be aware that what the Fed is doing is incredibly unique. They're buying assets from banks, other financial intermediaries that they never would have bought before. So high yield corporate debt, essentially junk bonds. They're buying assets from banks that they never would have purchased in the past. In 2008, 2009, the Treasury and the Fed got together and they created this thing called TARP, the Trouble Asset Relief Program, and they were buying crappy assets off of banks' balance sheets to try to keep that market liquid. Well, the Fed has been trying to keep these markets liquid as much as possible by engaging in huge amounts of quantitative easing, essentially buying anything that's coming across their desk in order to keep liquidity going. You could argue, I guess I just did, that that's pretty massive. The Fed isn't really the government. I mean, the Fed operates within the sort of government space, but they're not exactly the government, if you will. They're not beholden to the government. They're autonomous. And that certainly sounds massive to me. Not exactly a takeover. So I don't see, the government, let's say, buying up all these Wendys and sort of nationalizing a hamburger chain. I don't see that. But you could argue that whenever the government engages in these massive, let's say, bailout plans for the auto industry, the government has bailed out Ford a number of times. You could say, was that a government takeover? Well, they give them a loan and then Ford pays it back. I mean, that's government help. I don't see the government nationalizing anything like a car plant or nationalizing a Wendy's or a bunch of pizza joints or something like this. I see lots and lots and lots of bailout funds in order to keep those companies alive. So that's sort of the nationalized aspect that I see continuing.
Tom, what is the anticipated impact of the election on the economy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, whoever asked that. So historically, we see sort of different approaches from the different political ends, right? And so fiscal conservatives, Republicans by and large, have tried to enact policies that have reduced things like regulations, right? Have tried to create, let's say, tax incentives through corporations, through companies, through business, right? Trying to be much more, let's say, business friendly or business pro-business, if you will, right? And Democrats, liberals, if you will, have tried to engage in policies that are much more, let's say, social safety net oriented, but also, let's say, geared towards education, other types of, let's say, consumer-oriented protections, but also consumer-oriented policies. So two fiscal stimulus programs, one by a Republican might be, okay, let's decrease tax rates for businesses. The Democrat response might be, okay, let's create a child care tax credit, or let's give you a larger tax credit for like individual deductible for your kids, or let's let you deduct more of your educational expenses before like pre-tax. So both of them are reducing tax burdens. It's just how do you reduce the tax burden, and who and what is the way that you're managing those tax burdens, right? And so you can sort of look up the elements of different, let's say, tax programs for, let's say, Clinton versus Ronald Reagan, or George Bush, to get a sense for how these programs work. So I could see that if Trump is reelected and the Senate has an appetite for additional fiscal stimulus, that it might continue to be geared more towards business, so reducing tax burdens for business, giving them like low-cost loans. So the SBA, it's a very, very good program, and then you can see that it's very, very business-oriented, right? Versus, okay, additional, let's say, policies to help consumers, individual families. So rent forgivenesses, or let's just send you a check that would be used for your rent. So who gets that check? Does the mortgage company get the check, or does the person who is paying the rent get the check, right? How do I alleviate some of your expenses? So do I eliminate your college debt versus giving companies more options for how it is that they use their money? It's the same dollars, but how you position it is geared one towards business and maybe one towards consumers. That's the main difference, right? If Biden is elected president, but the Republicans maintain the Senate, I don't think that Mitch McConnell is going to want to give Biden a win. So I don't know what kind of policies come out of that negotiation. If Biden is elected president and he gets a Democratic Senate, then you're going to get some pushback, but ultimately you'll get some kind of a large additional stimulus like we saw with Obama. Obama was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, the ARRA, also known as the Obama stimulus. And there was a lot of pushback from Republicans at the time about being fiscally conservative. I don't see any avenue forward that's going to be anywhere close to fiscally conservative. I mean, this is so bad that we have to spend money that we don't have, right? Issuing debt. So those are the differences that I see.
Tom, what are your thoughts on the opening of the economy and requiring people to come back to work when schools' responses leave parents concerned for their safety?
Yeah, I really appreciate these questions, people. So here's what's going on. If you're in Atlanta, around Fulton County, I don't want to be too critical of their, let's say, return plan, but their return plan is, okay, teachers are required to wear masks, but kids aren't required to wear masks. And it's going to be staggered, and we're not exactly sure how people are going to eat lunch. I mean, maybe they are sure about how they're going to eat lunch, but I listened to this seminar. They had an open meeting the other night, and I was like, wait, it still sounds like you're not really sure. How is it grab-and-go lunch? Because they're not allowing any kind of mass social distancing. In any case, the return plan to actually sending your kids to school sounds scary as all get out. And so we had to make the decision, like, okay, like, I guess our kids are going to stay at home and enroll in virtual school. And our older daughter is making that same choice, and her kids are 7 and 9. Oh my gosh. And she said, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Like, how am I going to work and homeschool these kids? But she's like, I don't feel like it's really a safe policy. I mean, a bunch of like second graders running around, none of them are actually going to wear their masks. And so do I really want to put my kid in that kind of scenario? You know, her husband has some comorbidities. He has some health elements that might make him susceptible to COVID. So she has to do this for her family, which makes a lot of sense. Well, what the heck? Like, how's she going to do everything that she needs to do and teach her kids? That's crazy. I don't think there's a good policy. And I mean, I say that I'm not really good at predicting. I'm really good at predicting a couple things. Okay. So when Atlanta opened up to barbershops and what have you, I was talking to the AJC and I said, I predict with 100% certainty that you're going to write an article in the next month where some barbershop owner gives COVID to all of his patients or all of his clients, or some client comes in and gives it to everybody in the barber shop. And actually, they wrote both of those articles in 3 weeks. The article of this guy opened up his shop and now he's got COVID and he has to shut down and he's been in the hospital and he doesn't know how he's going to have to close his business. And the shop owner that says, somebody came in and we thought we were being really careful and then boom, everybody got COVID. All of my, beauticians and my hairstylists, they all got it. And I went, see, I mean, it's not that hard to make a prediction. So here's the prediction. You go back to school and you don't have your kids, you don't mandate masks for kids, right? Within the first month, 2, 3, 5, so you have 1,000 kids at school, half of them go back, that's 500. So 1% is 5 kids, okay? So within 1 month, you're gonna have 1% of these kids are gonna come down. Well, then when you do contact tracing and you realize that they've been interacting with 200 other kids, and then you have a teacher that ends up with this, or you've got the staff that ends up with this, then what's the reaction of the school? The school says, yeah, we realize that 200 kids have had contact with these 5 kids and these 3 teachers, but no big deal. We're just going to keep on moving on as if nothing happened. Which families want to be in that classroom? Who wants to be in that scenario? And does the school really want to take on liability for saying, yeah, you're right. Like this kid had contact with these 200 other kids, but no big deal. Like your kids will live, except for the one who doesn't, right? And then you've got a tragedy. How do you deal? How does that work going forward? I just read that UGA reported they had 143 faculty, staff, and students that tested positive. I just read this like 2 days ago. Okay, until what? Until an entire fraternity comes down with this thing and everybody is sick, or a department. I don't even know what that looks like. And as school, anybody who has school age kids knows that if one kid gets a cold, the entire class will end up with the cold, right? One kid gets the flu, and within the next month, everybody gets the flu. Everybody's kids are safe until they go to school and they come back with who knows what that they've caught at school. If schools aren't requiring masks, you know that this is going to percolate through that school age population and it's going to hit someone else. I don't know how you keep your job and homeschool your kids. I'm sure I just depressed the heck out of, like a couple dozen people here. That's my crystal ball. And it's, if it opens up, if things open up, then I promise you within the first week of October, you will read an article, such and such at a school, X number of kids all came in contact with this kid. Now the school is in crisis mode. That article will be written with 100% certainty. If I could short that in the market, I would do it right now. It'd be a lot better than buying Hertz.
Wow, Tom, that is.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to but it's really sunny today. It's beautiful out. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bum everybody out. So
no, that was it. That was information we all needed to hear. So thank you. Well, switching over to sports, how do you think the major sports leagues have navigated this crisis and related uncertainty? And do you see any long-term structural changes to this industry?
So I actually talked to I was talking to NPR a week ago, and Politico. Actually, the first time I've been interviewed by Politico, and they wanted to know what, surprisingly, what was the economic impact of, let's say, a bunch of schools not having a football program. I'm writing a textbook on the economics of sports, and so I was like, oh, I actually know this answer. So like the UGA football program is actually the most profitable football program in the entire country. You might not have known that. The UGA sports program is actually the most profitable college sports program in the entire country. It's actually better than University of Alabama by quite a bit. If let's suppose the UGA football program isn't able to work, the UGA football program pays for every other program other than the UGA men's basketball program. Is the only other net positive sports program at UGA. But the UGA football program pays for every other sports program in their system. All the other men's teams, all the other women's teams, except for the men's basketball team. And then it contributes back like $40 million to the university. Not a huge amount. It's a rounding error in terms of the university, but it's something. If that program, if the football program can't happen, then no other sports program can happen. The entire sports program system has to be shut down. Okay. So think about from a professional sports program, about 25% of your revenue comes from ticket sales. So just butts in the seats. And you get an additional, let's say between 7 and 10 from concessions. So it's like 32%, 35%, something in that neighborhood of revenue that you're not going to get if you don't have fans. Well, which business can operate if it doesn't have 35% of its revenue? No business that I know of, not really. So it's a revenue losing proposition to actually hold a season because you have to pay your workers and you're missing out on 35% of the revenue. Don't know what the broadcasting situations are because they're not going to, like for football or baseball, they're not going to pony up the entire $1 billion contract that they have with ESPN because they haven't run most of the season. So it's a losing proposition. I mean, they probably shouldn't. And I'm a huge sports fan. I'm a huge baseball fan. I'm a baseball nut. So I don't like the idea of not having a season. But financially, for the teams, it's probably a bad idea. I can't imagine that they could actually make this thing work and keep everybody safe for even the 2 months that they're proposing. I mean, baseball is supposed to go back in business, at the end of this month, and they're supposed to have a 60-game season. Well, that's going to happen until the entire Cincinnati Reds come down with this thing, and then what? And then they forfeit the rest of their games. That's going to happen. That's the article you're going to read as well. If this thing happens, the article you're going to read is, the bullpen of the Kansas City Royals have all just come down with COVID. Okay. I don't know if it's going to be the Kansas City Royals, but I mean, fill in the team and fill in the positions or the coaching staff, and boom, you're going to read that article. And then what happens? So I love sports, and I think sports are an important part of the fabric of not only our economy, but our social life. We like to talk about sports, and we like to live vicariously through our sports teams. I'm a Cubs fan for life, but I don't see how they're going to make this work. Financially, doesn't make any sense for the teams to actually run part of a season. Makes no sense at all. Health-wise, I don't think it works. So, I'm just sort of going to say for the next year, no sports, that would really suck. But I think that makes the most sense economically and health-wise.
Tom, this morning Trump stated that there's a record number of 7.5 million jobs created in the past 2 months, proving that our economy is roaring back and it's coming back extremely strong. How many of these new jobs are simply people returning to work?
That's what's going on, right? And it's roaring. I mean, maybe the economy is going to roar back. Maybe it's gonna be a V and it's not gonna be a zigzag. But I think that ignores the fact that, let's say, COVID is roaring back even louder, right? So the number of cases they're not going down; they are going up. And we've had this huge amount of fiscal stimulus to prop us up, right? This PPP plans, this extra $600 in terms of the unemployment insurance. I think that it's amazing that we've been able to survive the way that we have and that it's not any worse. And so I would like to be optimistic that, okay, like things can get back to normal. Remember that the economy was fundamentally in pretty good shape. A lot of economists have argued that companies were considerably over-levered. I was one of those economists. I was very, very worried about our tariffs and our trade relationships with China because they weren't buying our wheat and soy, our grains. And so our farmers in the Midwest, they were really suffering, and their default rates on loans were going up. And I was seeing this in November. Even in February, Valentine's Day, the yield curve on our debt had inverted. That's a sign that the economy is on the edge. Like, not everything was peaches and cream. We were on the edge of being pushed over, and then this thing really pushed us over. If we come roaring back, we're still coming roaring back to an unemployment rate that is higher than it ever was in 2008 and 2009 with this huge amount of stimulus, which is great, but the stimulus is ending. Uh-oh. So if we want to keep roaring back, we've got to add more kindling to this fire. We have to add more stimulus. So take that $600 and keep it going, right? Take the PPP and offer another round of SBA loans to all these small businesses. Like, I'm in favor of keeping all these businesses in business. It's really hard to do that if you've got these governors who are saying, no, yes, maybe, no. I mean, it's a windshield wiper of decisions. How do you do that? And how do you even plan if my wife has lots of clients in California, and every other day it's, okay, the governor said, oh yeah, then the governor said, no, now they're saying this, no, now they're mandating this, no, now they're doing this. It's almost impossible for them to have a reopening plan because their underlying mandates keep changing. How do you do that? I mean, I feel for these business owners. So part of it is that unless we have sort of some nationalized paces, like this is we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, then we're going to do this, it's really, really difficult for companies to really know how to plan moving forward. So I don't know. I mean, I guess I'd like to say, like, I'm seeing some light at the end of the tunnel, but every once in a while, then the tunnel all of a sudden gets another mile longer. You're like, oh man, okay, all right, we're going to keep drudging. The light's getting brighter, and they're like, oh yeah, but we're going to add another mile to the tunnel. So the mile to the tunnel is the governor's, making changes, but it's also the tunnel's getting steeper because the number of COVID cases keeps going up. I'm going to mix as many analogies as I possibly can in that example.
We love it. I think we have time for one more question, Tom. And so
Yep.
This last question is asking, where are you investing your dollars now for growth?
Not Hertz. Not Hertz. I'm not investing. So you probably notice, and this is one of the big disconnects, and I've talked to people maybe a dozen times every other week about this. They say, well, and people from this panel have talked to me before and say, look, the market is the economy, and the economy is the market, and there's a disconnect. So fixed income market, bonds, the bond market is broken. Okay. The government's buying everything. You're not sure that Ford's going to make good on a bond payment. Those yields are going up. They're in junk bond territory. And partly it's because you're not sure that Ford's actually going to make good on its payments. So government securities is not worth it because their yields are like 2%. Fixed income for private debt, corporate bonds, they might be really high yield, but you're thinking there's a huge default risk. That just all that leaves is real estate and private equities. And so real estate, like, you get yourself a REIT, but I mean, CMBSs are not doing well. Their default rates are going up. Commercial real estate is really, really, really uncertain. So now it's just the stocks, right? Your Netflixes and your Disneys and whatever else. And so, like everybody else, and I want to retire one day, so that means that I'm putting my money into as many balanced funds as I can, ETFs, mutual funds, and I'm trying to find markets that I think are going to be successful as a result of this. So consumer products, right? Not the banking sector, right? Artificial intelligence, gaming, right? I mean, my kid wants to buy like a gaming computer. I'm like, okay, you can save up, you can do that. And I'm thinking, geez, like, I can't imagine that my kid is that much different than a bunch of other 16-year-olds. So, this is a sector that I have to be aware of, right? I mean, this super serious gaming sector, high speed computer, visual, graphic cards, whatever else, there's a bunch of ETFs and mutual funds out there that are, constructed of companies that work in those spaces. I think those spaces are not going away. I think people want to be entertained, and the entertainment that they're going to get is from gaming. So, you think about our core industries are in trouble because people don't have as much income. And if we don't get a second round of stimulus, then their income is going to fall quite steeply at the end of this month. So I would say, try to find an industry that is going to be successful in the midst of an economic recession. We're going to be in this recession for another year, right? And that's when the Fed said this, the market dropped like 800 points. People were like, whoa, the Fed must be serious about this. They're saying it. I believe that that's true. I believe that the market is picking up all of the latent demand from all the other sectors of assets that just don't make sense anymore. And so the reason that we're seeing equities take off is because everybody's pulling their money out of everything else that is incredibly risky. And they're saying, okay, let's going to buy this. But it's also they're readjusting what their risk tolerances are because they're staying at home. They're saying, okay, I don't have anything else to do. Maybe I can day trade Hertz all day. And so it's a company the company has even said that their stock is going to be worthless, and people are still buying it. What other disconnect, what other evidence do you need of 100% disconnect than that? So whatever you do, don't buy Hertz. I don't work for Hertz, by the way, or any other car company, but I think that's a losing proposition, unless you short it, I suppose.
Thanks so much, Tom. We really appreciate you returning with the economy and me. Lots of great information today. So thank you so much for returning. And we want to thank you, our attendees who come back every Thursday to join us for the Business Over Breakfast webinar series. We appreciate you spending a part of your day with us today. We've got a couple of upcoming workshops and information sessions that we want to share with you all. On July 15th, if you want to join us over lunch for a brief 30-minute information session about course offerings and how we can help you advance your career with Emory Executive Education, we ask that you join us for that. Information on that particular information session, along with how to register, is located in the chat. Also, Tom Smith is coming back with our second finance workshop series, kicking off on July 24th, so just a couple of weeks. Really encourage you all to register for that particular workshop. Again, that information and web link to register for that is also located in the chat. Next Thursday, Patrick Noonan's going to be returning with Decoding the Analytics of COVID. So we'll hope you all will join us next Thursday, July 9th at 9 a.m. Tom sounds interested. Sounds like you're going to be joining us, Tom.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious about the analytics of COVID. Yeah, you bet.
Yeah, great stuff, and great follow-up to what Tom is talking about today, everyone. And last but not least, momentarily, you will see a brief survey pop up on your screen. We just ask that you take a couple of minutes to fill out that survey, give us some feedback on today's session, and we look forward to seeing you all next Thursday at 9 a.m. Tom, any final remarks?
Actually, I'm doing this personal finance workshop where I'm helping people sort of understand what their finances are, getting them a good savings plan. If you haven't done a whole lot of investing, I'm showing people how to do investing. Here's how you search mutual funds. Here's how you buy an ETF. And that's a plan that we did a seminar, and we're running it again in July. I suppose they can reach out to you to register for that. And so, and I think there's a link that somebody put on the chat. So yes, it's a good program. We had like maybe 25 people who signed up for it earlier, and they all found it to be like really, really helpful. So I would encourage people to sign up for that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Tom. And thank you all again for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday, and have a great holiday weekend.